It's been around for about 8 years. I was actually in college with Kate. Kate, I can see your checkered shirt, so I know I'm pointing blindly in the right direction. And when we were in college, I remember somebody bought a camera. Our first camera I got was a Canon 750D, which I still have. I use as a web camera. And I was like, yes, I spent so much money on this. My film is going to be amazing. And then someone came into the class and they had a Blackmagic Cinema camera. And collectively, everyone went, that person's film is going to be amazing. And I was like, well, this doesn't make any sense to me. Like, what's your film about? There was none of that. It was just like, wow, that movie's going to be great because their camera costs significantly more than our camera. And so that sort of ethos and that idea kind of frustrated me. So I won't go into too much detail on it, but effectively we have a 2-hour class that I can't really do practically. So what it's actually going to be is a 2-hour charm offensive, really to convince you that, I know there's this adage that the best camera is the camera you have in your pocket, and I don't necessarily believe that. I'm not some idiot who's going to stand up here and be like, yeah, you can use your phone and it's way better than all this stuff. It's not. I'm a big believer in it's not the tool, it's the artist, okay? And so anything you use to tell your story is important. What I'm more interested in is people out there who feel they can't tell a story because they don't have access to expensive equipment. And that's the space in which I exist in. This idea that someone's like, oh, I'd love to make a movie or I'd love to make a documentary, but I don't know how to use a camera. And Kate would probably vouch for this. I'm not very tech savvy. I was never very tech savvy in college. Don't like technology, get frustrated quite easily. Turns out I have ADHD and that's probably why, but I get very frustrated. So I gravitated towards phones because they were easy for me to use, fast, to comprehend. And so what it does is it opens up, because, and we can talk about examples, regardless of what you use to tell your story, the fundamentals don't change. You all know that. You might have to tweak yourself a little bit depending on what camera you're using, depending on what equipment you're using, but the fundamentals don't change when it comes to telling a good story. And yet this idea that you need to have a very expensive camera to get into that. And it's one of these art forms that exists where technology and money is a barrier to entry. If you don't have enough money to buy expensive equipment, unless you can find yourself a crew or a cameraman or doesn't want to pitch in, sometimes that can be a blocking point for a lot of people. And I work in a lot of schools, I work with a lot of students. When I was in secondary school, the only interaction I had with film was if I was lucky or stupid enough to do transition year. It was not really pitched as a viable career path for people at the time in my age. The only way you got into film is if you had an interest outside of school maybe and you went to college. And so what's great about now and the accessible technology and the access to use it is that these career paths are becoming viable for people a lot earlier on. As I said, I work in a lot of schools. They're bringing video and filmmaking into the leaving cert cycle. I don't know about the junior cert cycle. And so kids are going to be able to make movies, work, collaborate. They're going to be graded on that. How, I mean, Jesus, fucking how they're going to get away with that is beyond me. How the teacher's going to be like, yeah, you work together as a crew, an A, oh, your movie's crap, a C. I don't know, but it's going to be a very interesting time. But video making, video editing, all that sort of stuff is folding into, is becoming accessible. And social media has a lot to do with it as well. I'm not going to harp on about social media today. It slowly interacts and degrades even our storytelling ability. Everything's got to be faster, quicker. You got to get to the point quicker, faster. So today I'm going to cover a bit about, I suppose, using your phones, a bit about the equipment. As I said, I normally do a practical element, which we're not going to be able to do. I'll try and find a way to do it. I'm going to say this now before I forget, because I have a tendency to forget. I do have a lens here to give away. It's actually quite expensive. I think it's worth about €85. And so I do have this to give away to some lucky person in the audience. Because it's dark, I really just want to take this and fling it blindly into the crowd. But I'm not a sadist during the day. So I'm going to keep this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a way to give it away. I might try and do something involving Vox Pops or something like that as a way to kind of harvest social media content. If you do a Vox Pop, I'll pick a name out of a hat and we'll give that away. Colin has one. Colin can vouch. Company closed down, nothing to do with quality, just the guy couldn't run it himself anymore. Costing him too much. So, this is where the slideshow comes in because it's good for me.
You can tell me next time.
Yeah, we just do next time. Yeah. I don't know what's on this slide. I just randomly. You can skip over this. Grant, you can skip over this. Grant, I'll just touch on this briefly. The design's really bad, but just to give you an idea of my journey. I say my journey in the industry, I've existed outside the industry. I mean, I work on a lot of projects. I work with a lot of filmmakers, but I very much feel very nichey. I very much feel off to one side. This over here was incredibly unfit and overweight, Rob. He liked festivals and he liked going to festivals. I used to volunteer at a lot of festivals. I worked at festivals in Canada. I have a background in arts management. I have a background in festival management. I didn't have a background in film, but I did have a love of film. And so I used to have my own radio show on Dublin City FM where I'd review films. And a couple of years after, I was like, you know what, I think I should go back and learn how to make a film. And that's when I met Kate. And that's when I went to Pulse College. And one of the things I found quite frustrating about filmmaking teaching at the time was that I found it sort of ignored the existence of the internet. And it was very much like, no, movies peaked in terms of how they were made in 2005. And no technological advances have happened since then. And so that's all we're going to talk about. And you'd be like, well, what about the internet? And like, no. I was like, hey, but you can distribute your own film on Prime. No. You used to be able to do this, by the way. It's probably changed the last couple of years, but you used to be able to put your own film on Prime. So I found all that kind of strange. I was a little bit older. And so I kept thinking, why am I doing this? Why is it this way? Why does this make sense to me? Why does this? So I gravitated towards mobile phones, as I said, because they're accessible and because they were easy to use. And I realized there was a community of filmmakers out there who didn't have confidence. Like me at the time, I didn't have confidence. I didn't have the confidence to pick up a camera. Didn't have the confidence to go out and buy an expensive camera. All my ideas were crap. And so I gravitated towards the use of a phone simply because it was it stripped away a certain blocking point, allowed me to kind of understand what I want to do a little bit better. As I said, from that, I started the film festival. I started the film festival as a joke or a lark, not really a joke. I just wanted to start a film festival. I was looking for something to do that was kind of nichey. So I set up the festival as a way to bring together a community of people. I really hoped to bring together a community of Irish people. And what I found 8 years ago at the time, and the industry has changed a lot, was a lot of people in Ireland were like, didn't you make that on your phone? Aren't you great? Come back to us now when you have yourself a real camera and we'll talk. And I found that to be, if anyone knows me, I hate when people tell me stuff like that. I hate when people tell me I cannot do stuff. And so that only kind of fired me up. So what I started doing was I started teaching classes through the festival, really as a way to build a community of filmmakers. And I knew there was people out there like me who didn't feel confident, who weren't necessarily going to take out a lot of money, rented a big camera and go and film and shoot all this stuff. They wanted to be kind of eased into it. They wanted to kind of understand. And I remember the first year I did the festival, I spoke on TV3 and I did the morning show. I said to my girlfriend at the time, I said, I do not know why, like in my mind, and I was 28 at the time, in my mind I was like, phones are hip, phones are cool, young people are going to love this. And so I did Ireland AM and I said, the demographic for this is all wrong. Like who's going to come to the festival? They're all too old. I want to be aiming at young people. And the festival sold out and a huge portion of people who came seen it on Ireland AM. And they came because they were a much older generation of people and they were like, you know what, there's stories in the community I want to capture. I'm in a nursing home and I want to be able to interview people in my nursing home. And so they looked at their phone as a device that they used every day. They mightn't necessarily have a huge grasp of it, but they had an understanding of it enough to say, maybe I can do this. Where if I handed them a camera, they'd be like, no, I can't do this, okay? And so that's how that started. And that sort of breeded a sort of a community which has been growing ever since. I've taught filmmaking classes here. I taught filmmaking classes in Europe. Randomly was invited to Russia to teach it something. And I was adamant they were going to take my kidneys until we got there. And it turned out to be this huge event and there was people looking for autographs. It was all very strange. All of us on the panel at the time were like, why are we here? And each one of us had been kind of randomly plucked from the internet. It was all very strange. But so I taught filmmaking classes. And then from that, I set up a business where I was a marketing consultant, which I taught businesses how to create their own content on social media. I was probably a little bit ahead of the curve on that because I stopped doing it in the last year or so. And now I'm inundated with people asking me to do it, where 7 years ago, people were like, sure, man, no one's going to need that. But I had my own production company and I realized that it was the internet was a hungry, angry baby that needed to be fed 24/7 and you couldn't feasibly afford to do it, to outsource it the entire time. So you needed to be able to do some of it in-house. That was the noble, naive idea I have. Turns out people just want to pay people to do it for cheap. And so they like the idea of being able to do it for themselves. And so that is kind of the paths I've been on for the last 8 years. I said I run the festival, I do filmmaking classes, I produce films with people. I'm working with a South African filmmaker who's coming over now. She's producing a documentary about a African band who are traveling the world. And so she's shooting some stuff in Whelan's on the 7th of July. So we're working on that. And as I said, I've built up over the last 8 years a huge community of international and national filmmakers. I mean, the first year for the festival, we got 4 submissions and that number has quadrupled. Not down to me, it's more down to the community growing, and also kind of a more general acceptance of stuff shot on, or using whatever tool you have in your pocket to tell a story and using it that way. So that's a bit about column. You can skip over this one quickly. Cool. Anyway, this is the ethos that we have. The technology you have should not, if I could read it, the technology you use should not have an impact on the story that you tell. And I'm a firm believer of that. And the example I always use in classes is 28 Days Later. Has everyone seen 28 Days Later? Yeah. Does everyone remember what 28 Days Later looks like?
Grainy video.
Yeah. At the time, everyone was like, this guy is falling. He's using digital video. It's the end of cinema. Why did Danny Boyle choose to use those cameras to film 28 Days Later?
It's cheap.
Right.
That was one thing. Why else?
Time on the street.
Yeah, it was time on the street. He had to shoot in London. He had very minimum time to do it. And so he had these Sony I can't remember which ones they were, X3 cameras. You can pick them up for about 300 quid now. And he literally would drag and drop them in different places because he had only so much time that he could film derelict parts of London. So one of the logic was, well, why don't we film faster? We'll shoot on digital. Also for aesthetic purposes, it tied into the grimy kind of end of world vibe that it was. It looked terrible in 2000 or 2003 or whenever it came out. It looks even worse now, but it ties in with the story and the narrative, and nobody gives a crap. And one of the things I realized doing this was, if somebody ever turned to me and said, yeah, but your film's set in a phone, it doesn't look very good, my response always is, well, I'm not making the film for you, I'm making the film for an audience. And if the story is good enough, and the story is compelling enough, and the performances, and all the things that are not technology-based are really, really good, your audience isn't going to care what it's filmed on. They're just not. So this idea of people pushing back and saying, well, it's filmed on a phone, so it's going to be crap, or quality's going to be crap, or thing. And we can get into quality, and I can show you some stuff now in a second. It's all nonsense, because I could show films. I remember we were in the IFI 3 years ago, and I put on a film to test on the cinema screen, and it was directed by an Oscar-winning filmmaker called, I'm going to blank on his name. And I put it on, and one of the staff came down to me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, are you telling me that was filmed on a phone? I was like, yeah, 100%. I mean, to me, it's nonsense. It's almost a moot point to be up here being like, you film on a phone, because we're all absorbing things the entire time filmed on phones. We don't even care. You know what I mean? It's just another piece of equipment. Now, I will say, there's some caveats to that. If I show you one of Lady Gaga's videos filmed on a phone, I mean, it is filmed on a phone, technically speaking. It's also using a lot of expensive equipment to help hold that phone, carry that phone. I understand that, but the processing power of the device in the pocket is very much what we would all have in our pocket. Does anyone know the Lady Gaga video I'm talking about? Roll it there, Colin. 2 seconds. There's a kind of a history thing. I'm not going to go through it because it's more of a first lecture for students. I recognize being off stage does not make for a dynamic video, so I'm coming back on now. You've probably seen this enough times at this point, Colin, have you? Which is in the cinema. It's on Netflix, and he made another movie called High Flying Birds, which is about does anyone know High Flying Birds? Is anyone interested in the exciting world of NBA lockout negotiations? I'm the only one, am I? It's actually an excellent movie. It's written by the guy who wrote Moonlight, and it's on Netflix, and it's called High Flying Birds. And they're both on Netflix, and if you want to watch a filmmaker figuring out how to use a device, it's very, very interesting. The first film is set predominantly in the dark, in rooms, dark rooms. It's a weird use of a phone because the low light is not great on it at the time. I think he filmed it on an iPhone 8. But again, much like 28 Days Later, it ties into the aesthetic choices he's made. It's a film about paranoia. The wide-angle lens on the phone creates a lot of negative space above the characters' heads whenever they're in this mental asylum, which really ties into this idea that it's a suspicion around every corner. You can see a long distance, you can see a lot of the frame, and so it makes your eye kind of hunt around the frame. And so it ties into this element of paranoia that's going on. There's also a lot of strange angles he uses. Again, he's able to get the phone quite close. He's able to put the phone in weird places, which gives you kind of a jarring thing. He said it himself when he filmed it. I wouldn't be able to get half the shots I can get with a traditional camera simply because it's too big and I can't get in at these angles and stuff like that. High Flying Birds, which is the follow-up film he did, is the complete opposite to that. It's almost 90% filmed during the day in offices in and around New York. It looks really, really good. There is some funny framing in it when you watch it. to get people to stand in a huddle, and because the lens is so wide, he has to get everyone to like stand really close. And you're like, why would all these people stand so close to each other when they're having a conversation? And there's lots of weird angles, not quite mid shots, not quite wide shots, and things like that. But it's a very interesting study in a filmmaker using a new piece of technology and then trying to kind of figure out how it works. Actually, only recently, last year or this year, Steven Soderbergh does stuff you never hear about it. He released a TV show with Michael Cera, I think. All filmed on phones. Again, I cannot remember for the life of me what it was called. It's one of these kind of secret projects that only exists on his website, which gives you an idea of how much free time and money that person has. So, perfect. Okay, so these are just examples of stuff. Can you just go ahead there? I'll get on to more technical stuff now. No, this is the trailer. This is the poster for Unsane. You can find it was 2018. This is a film that Zack Snyder did, or The Man We Do Not Dare Speak His Name. Because somebody's going to come at me online, or I'm going to be forced to watch that last 2 movies that he did, Slow Mo the movie or whatever it's called. So yeah, he did kind of a proof of concept for an app starting off. So there's a lot of these things out there. Olivia Wilde directed a music video, filmed on a phone. It's actually excellent. I can't remember the name of the band. Go ahead there. Yeah, we've done that. Perfect. Okay, so the central premise before I get into equipment and all this kind of stuff is this argument, and I feel bad for this chap, it's a very low quality picture. I mean, and this kind of, to me, always sums up my argument when people are like, oh, you're using your phone, you're not a real filmmaker or whatever. I was like, well, if I handed my phone to Steven Spielberg and said, Steven Spielberg, go make a movie, I'm pretty sure Steven Spielberg would come back with something infinitely more watchable than random guy holding massive camera. Maybe, I could be wrong, random guy holding massive camera could be some sort of prodigy. But I don't know. I'm doing him a disservice because I pulled him off the internet. Saying that, Steven Spielberg has also directed a music video using a mobile phone for I can't remember his name, the guy from Mumford & Sons. Will you do me a favor? Will you just pull up YouTube there for a second? I just want to see if I can show you this a couple of Has everyone seen Steven Spielberg's music video he directed with his wife, where his wife pushes him around on a chair? Yeah, I'll show you now. And then we'll get into the good stuff. I'll show you 2 things. I'll show you this first. Can we just get there's no sound on this, but it'll give you an idea of the visuals. So, yeah. Sorry, just to show you this first. This is the trailer for Unsane. There's no sound on it, but I just want to show you some of the kind of visuals. Now, this is old. This is 6-7 years old. This is Steven Soderbergh movie, so I think this is an iPhone 8. Again, he said he found it quite freeing. It allowed him to trial and experiment stuff in the moment. He said he was always going to make movies on phones. This is untrue. He said he was going to retire. He didn't do that either. So we'll see how that goes. But again, you start to see when it gets to the mental hospital side of it, I think there's a couple of examples of a couple of shots where a lot of this stuff, you see this huge kind of bright open spaces above her head. You're able to see 2 rooms at once. There's a lot of this kind of stuff. It's kind of got a grubby, for lack of a better say, urine-soaked vibe to it. And it's interesting, he took on this project to make this using a mobile phone, and he inevitably ended up working with Apple to improve their camera app at the time because they were having real trouble with focus and exposure and slight changes in light, even when the focus is supposed to be locked, even when the exposure is supposed to be locked. Didn't matter how locked it was, there was still subtle changes in light when he moved from room to room. So he ended up working with Apple to help them kind of improve their camera because going through this process, they recognized that there was a lot of problems. They had to do a lot of post-production work on it to try and get rid of kind of changes that had happened in terms of subtle changes in light and stuff like that. Just in-camera stuff they couldn't control simply because the device wouldn't allow them to do it. There's a lot of examples of those kind of wide frames above the head there. Yeah, so that's just an example of that trailer. Loses a bit of its impact without thing. Again, kind of grubby looking, but also who cares, because Steven Soderbergh makes good movies. And I'll show you this one now, and then I'll just show you, again, it's a music video without sound, so what's the point? But this is directed by Steven Spielberg, and I'd say co-directed by his wife, Kate Capshaw. And if you saw the making of it, it really just is Steven Spielberg holding a phone in Marcus Mumford's face. That's it. But again, as I said, if you're scrolling through YouTube, if anyone does that, and you came across this, you might think, oh, it's an interesting design. There is some post-production stuff done in it. There's a kind of a blurry motion blur thing going on occasionally. But for the most part, it's fairly straightforward. And the fact that Steven Spielberg, this actually seems like he's slumming it in terms of how it looks, in terms of style. There is one shot. Where is it? So it backs up. So you see the camera backs up and, oh yeah. So this here should start to move now. Yeah, see this? So this is Steven Spielberg on a wheelie chair being pushed by his wife. And that's it. Just a simple kind of wheelie chair, 4 things. Yeah, so there's some post-production trickery there in terms of jumping between 2 shots. And you can kind of see the jitter in it when it happens. But yeah, Steven Spielberg doing his job. Okay, perfect. Can you stop that and go back to presentation? Grant. Yeah. Okay. Just going. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So before I start, does anyone have any specific questions about equipment they'd like to know before I start going through some stuff?
Sound for filming on phone.
Okay. So exact same as you would normally. I didn't bring it with me. It's in the car. I have a boom pole. I have a shotgun mic that attaches to it. The only difference is you need one of these to attach it to the sound on your phone. But it's the same equipment, same cable, runs down, snakes down a boom pole and everything. It just runs into that. That's if you're recording sound directly into it, if you want to record something on set. Obviously, if you're doing something separate with a separate recorder, you don't even need one of these. You just run it straight in. But if you want to run the sound into that. Now, the downsides of this, the fundamental downsides when you start getting into it, is you've only got one port for everything. Okay, so you have to start getting splitters for stuff. There's a small splitter you can get on this that allows you to attach headphones to this so you can listen to the sound at the same time. But effectively, the only difference is this. That's it. It costs a tenner. Everything else runs the same. So if you have a boom and you have a shotgun mic and you have your traditional cable and you want to run it somewhere, put one of these on, run it into your phone, that's it.
So would you have to run the XLR into an adapter into that?
So I have a boom, I have a mic that has an XLR adapter on it. So you click it into it, and so the adaptation is at the top of the mic, nothing to do with this. And then I'm just taking the TR thing and lashing it in here and putting it into my phone. So it's very, very kind of standard. That's the first thing people always say is like, oh, what about sound? What about sound? Can I get good sound? And it is fundamentally, as we all know, sound is important, more important than visuals. And that was always the argument I had about visuals where, I mean, the example I was using in the class is that, I mean, I could leave the lens cap on a camera and shoot for 5 minutes and take the lens cap off. And he went, what happened to start a movie? I go, yeah, you know, it's funny you said that. And it's funny you noticed that. Actually, the title character has depression. And so the first 5 minutes of the movie are an insight into how he views the world. And then when the lens cap comes off, it's like, oh my God, visuals. Okay. So you can lie about visuals to anyone, but you can't lie about sound. So I understand that. So that to me is what you need regardless. As I said, everything else after that is like, I mean, this is everything else after that is somewhat just variations on what you use already. This is just a microphone this is a pretty decent, well, it's a decent quality mid-range shotgun microphone for your phone, okay? It also works as a boom. It's got an attachment you can attach to a boom pole if you want, okay? So it works the exact way. It has all the same inputs and outputs that your normal microphone would, except I have to use one of these to connect it. Because it's a splitter, I have to connect from TR to TR. Everyone knows what I'm saying when I say TR and TR.
No.
Okay, I'll explain. Does anyone have headphones on them? Old school headphones, not Bluetooth. Yeah. If you have Bluetooth, if you have headphones if you have a set of headphones and the headphones don't have, you know the rings on headphones, the little lines. If you have a microphone and it's got, if you have a headphone, it's got 2 rings on it. What does it mean? 2 lines. Any guesses?
Mic.
Yeah, left and right ear. And if you have one that's got 3 rings on it, it means left and right ear and microphone. So any microphone you get that comes with your phone that connects into it should have three rings on it. Okay, and that's how you know it's got microphone capability. So that's all these are. What they do is they take they adapt it so that you can put 2 rings into 3 rings or 3 rings into 2 rings. Okay, so that's why you need one of those. Okay, so that's kind of the purpose of it. So these microphones here, you can pick them up, dime a dozen, whatever. What I would say is, as we all know, again, and this is regardless of whether you're using a camera or whether you're using microphones. If someone said to me, Rob, I have €100 to buy for equipment for my movie, how much money would I said? Well, I'd spend €95 of it on a microphone. Okay, because much like the example I gave you with a lens cap on your camera, you can't get away with dodgy sound. You can't. I mean, you can try and flub it. Oh, well, my character's got, depression, and so they hear things funny. And you're like, yeah, I don't get that. The only person that gets away with dodgy sound is Christopher Nolan. Because he's the only person who'll make me sit forward. I mean, I know why he does it, but Tenet is the funniest thing where he's like, okay, so he's insisting on doing the sound this way, and he's going to put the characters on a boat, and he's going to have them talk through walkie-talkies. And you're like, now you're taking the piss. And then you're like, why do you do that? He's like, this is the way I do things. And you're like, ugh. I'll go to see your next movie anyway, sir, even though I didn't like Tenet. But he's probably the only person who get away with it. But yeah, here, I'll pass them around. People probably have them already, but you can here, and I'll give you here, you can take the attachment for that. Now, just a quick question. What would be the fundamental problem with using that thing you have in your hand? Here, I'll give you this.
It's very short.
Which is short? Oh yeah, well yeah, here, I'll give you that as well. Sorry, can I get that back for a second? Just want to put something on it. Can I grab that mic back for a second? Just the microphone. Oh, just a second.
It's delicate and it goes into the power input for the camera.
There you go. Which?
That's going into the power input, so.
That?
Yeah.
Yeah, everything runs into the same port. That's the only real problem. So you start to need splitters to be able to kind of plug headphones in, so you're able to listen to the sound you're recording at the same time. You can pick up these little splitters for like €10. They're like tiny little things that just connect into this, so you can start connecting different things into it. So that's the real problem, is that you're loading everything through one port. Okay. Now, as I said, if we were going out and making a movie tomorrow, it wouldn't really matter, because we'd probably shoot the sound externally anyway and link it up. So it's not going to be a real problem. So where this is a problem is if you want to shoot the sound and record it into the phone, and also if you are doing maybe run and gun stuff or something like that, okay? But for the most part, with planning and prep, we're probably not going to be a concern, because we're probably going to use an external microphone anyway, which will run the sound into. So again, if you're doing something documentary based, or you're out and about and you're running around, I tend to record sound directly into it, simply because I couldn't be arsed putting it together later on. And the type of stuff that I do, it suits me, but couldn't be arsed is pretty much my MO for a lot of this stuff, which is like somebody gives me a camera, and I have a camera, I have all the drones, I have all that. I use them, depends on the project. But a lot of times I just like being able to shoot stuff on the go. Now, a lot of times people say to me, oh, well, you should really plan and prep, and you are. And that's why the sound thing isn't necessarily a problem if you're going to plan and prep something, because as I said, you're going to use an external microphone. So it's not the end of the world. If you did want to use one of these, what's your fundamental problem with this?
Can you put a blend onto that?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. What else is a fundamental problem in it?
Nothing to attach to.
Exactly. If I hang this off the phone, it's going to hang down. Okay. So that's where you start moving into like this sort of stuff. Yeah, which is the purpose of it. They come in different sizes. This is like, this is €12. I have one from this same Swedish company that is like something Batman built to shoot videos. It's huge, it's jet black, it weighs a ton, you self-charges, all this sort of stuff. I think I got a prototype and then that was it. Have you seen that one? Yeah, so it's huge, it's really heavy, there's a lot of weight to it, it's great. And that's why you want it, because there's a lot of weight to it. Because that's what that's for, just simply to attach that to it. Yeah, because without it, stuff just hangs down and it's, kind of nonsense. But as I said, necessarily you don't have to do that. You can do whatever. You can find different ways to jerry rig it and stuff like that. Again, I mean, I'm wired with one of those now, but I mean, we all know, we're all familiar with these at this point. Again, there's your, I should have used this as in my example. There's your split cable. Yeah. So it's got 2 rings to 3 rings. Okay. Now, if we were using this with a camera, it'd be 2 to 2, but because it's gone into a phone, we need 2 to 3. And the good people at Rode used to not sell these microphones with this, and then you'd have to buy this separately, which was madness. But now you get it with it, so it's fine. So again, there you go. So that clicks in here, and then that's there, and you're good to go. Yeah. Now I have a separate splitter that goes into it. Then you plug your headphones into it, and then you can listen as you go, which is what you really need because you need to be able to hear it back. So those kind of things. What else? Any other questions about specific equipment rather than me rattle on about specific stuff?
Lens adapters?
Lens adapters. Yeah, I didn't bring it. So 2 things. So there's depth of field adapters. Should I see if I can find an example? Has anyone seen depth of field adapters for a phone? You're kind of getting into nonsense territory. I have one for my Canon lenses. I'll show you now. So, see this? Yeah. At some point, you're like, well, this is no longer convenient. Why am I using my phone? Do you know what I mean? So I have one of these, a depth of field adapter, okay? I actually have this one right here, yeah? I kind of bought it for fun. It's a Canon adapter and I can attach my Canon lenses to it, my old lenses from my first camera, and that's why I used it, okay? What you do get with the depth of field adapter is, first of all, your trade-off is you lose mobility. Can't really do much with it. It's pretty big. You have to sit on a tripod. You can't really move around with it. The second thing is what it does is it gives you a sort of a blurred fraying around the edges of the frame. Effectively speaking, you can start with depth of field adapters. I don't really use them. They're kind of a novelty. I know a lot of filmmakers who have them. I know somebody who used one recently to do a shoot. When you do, I remember in the entire time I run the festival, only one submission has come through where I had to go to another filmmaker and say, was this filmed on a camera or phone? Because the only time I couldn't tell. And he filmed it using a depth of field adapter. So it looked like it had been filmed on a DSLR, but except for the giveaway was the fraying around the edges. It's kind of a soft focus thing around the edges. So the look you get is very much what you get from an old Canon camera or something like that when you have one on. The difference being is that, I said, the trade-off is kind of clunky, and the general logic is if you're going to go to the effort of attaching that, why not just change your phone out to a camera and save yourself a bit of work? So that's kind of why they're not that popular. What you get now, so the thing about lenses, right? Generally, you can get incredible lenses. I have a lens from a company called Dream Grip. It's a 65mm lens, and I use it. I think it's 65. I use it religiously. All right, it's incredible. Love it. It's a glass lens, very expensive. Generally, what you need, they give you these. The lens that I have here is an example to give out. Okay, it's a lovely glass lens. It's 2 lenses in one. Okay, but it's got that annoying clip thing. You know, where you clip onto your phone. So you're gonna know what I'm talking about when I say that. I'll give you this. Do you know what? Does the person who is going to get this later on mind if I open and use as an example? I'm going to take that as a no. You know I'm opening it, so it's not going to be tampered with. Where's my keys? I might have one in my camera bag, but I'm not rooting around for it. Okay. Does the person also mind that I ripped the box slightly? Listen, I could be feeling generous to myself and make that person me, so oh God. No, it's okay. It's okay. I was too excited. It was like Christmas. Okay. Okay, so generally, I'll pass this around. When you buy these lenses, okay, the general thing is they come with this kind of clip thing, which sits over your thing like that, yeah, and then you screw on your lens like that, yeah. What do you think is the problem with that? Does it seem very secure? Someone could knock into it, some clever. So these are generally lenses come with this, but I have never used one of these in my entire life. Nor do I intend to. I don't like it. There's no security, there's no stability in it, okay? So, how it generally works is you can buy cases with threads built into it, okay? So I have a phone case here. This phone case has threads built into it. Here you go, and I'll pass that around with that so you can see what that looks like. This case has threads built into it, which are just little rings in here, okay? And what you do is you buy a lens, and you screw the lens onto the front of your camera, yeah? Okay, so now you have nothing but support. It sits into a little groove on the lens, and it works perfectly. The way it's gone now, which makes far more sense, is magnets, yeah? So the next step up is, this is a magnetized phone case. And I just magnetize that onto it, yeah? And then that's why it's the same with lenses. You just magnetize the lenses onto it and they sit on it, okay? So that's like wonderfully secure. That's obviously not a lens, but here, you can pass that around. It's an ND filter, yeah. And so you buy the cases. Now the frustrating thing is, every time you buy a new phone, you have to buy a new case. That new case has to have a lens, either a groove in it, or it has to have one of those magnetized cases, okay? And that's the frustrating thing. So the problem I have is, like, I had an iPhone Pro Max 11, which I used for ages, and I had all the cases for it, and I could screw my lovely 65mm case into it. And then I got a 14 and I couldn't find a case to fit it. So I'm forever buying new cases and attaching things to it, okay? But the magnet thing is kind of, again, way easier, because now I can just magnetize stuff to it. So I don't really have to worry too much about the case anymore. I just have to buy out new lenses, okay? Unless I buy a new phone, they're always subtly changing size. Enough to get me to buy new stuff. But you know yourself, as filmmakers, you're never happy, and you're always buying something that's going to make you happy. And it works for about a day, and you're like, I think I need something else. I'm hovering around a new set of wireless microphones. Don't need them, have 3 sets already. But I bought a gimbal, and these wireless microphones go with that gimbal, so I'm like, now I need them. And for about 3 weeks, I'll be like, if I don't have these, I'll die. And I'll get them and I'll throw them in a pile. And I'm aware of this shameless behavior, but we're all aware of it because that's the way we are. So you will get this. Whoever wins this lens, or now gets crap left over in an open box, you will get this, and you can attach it on that way. But as I said, if you took that groove off, there's a little kind of tracks on that lens, and they screw into a lens case. So if anyone has a phone, they go online. There's a company called Uzali that sell them quite cheap. If you look up, oh cool, I don't know what was going on there. Because it's dark, I just saw you slowly shuffling towards me, and I'd been talking about 28 Days Later earlier on. I was like, oh no, it's happening. It's happening. They're making a sequel and I'm in it. Finally, they got my letters written in my own blood. So that thread screws into the case. So what you do is you just look up Uzali, and you look up 12, I think it's like threaded case Uzali, and you could probably buy a case for your phone for 12 quid. Okay, and then you can just start screwing any lenses you want into it. Yeah, generally the only really lenses you get are a wide angle lens, which is kind of irrelevant because you've already got a wide angle lens on your phone. You can get a macro lens, a micro, like a fisheye lens, or a kind of a macro lens, and then you get these kind of, as I said, 65mm, which give you this kind of really, really nice mid shot. Okay, I think I might have do I have it? No, I don't. I used to carry with me all the time my anamorphic lens. So you can get an anamorphic lens for your phone, yeah. And famously, I'll show you. Tangerine. Has anyone seen Tangerine? No? Does anyone not know what I'm talking about when I say Tangerine? So Tangerine won Sundance, I think, in 2016. And it's filmed on a phone. It was one of the big phones, first films to do it. What's his name? Oh, the filmmaker who went on to do Red Rocket, and his name is now eluding me. It'll come to me in a second. So he made this film, okay? He shot it on, I think he might have used an even older iPhone. He shot an iPhone, right? But the only reason he decided to use iPhones is because there was anamorphic lens. So this is all filmed using anamorphic lenses that are attached to your phone. You can get a really good anamorphic lens for your phone for about €80, okay? I'll get into the technical side of it now in a second, but he decided to shoot his phone because he could use anamorphic lenses, which give you this kind of, as you said, they squish the image down, they give it kind of a more quote-unquote cinematic look, which is why people use them. A lot of people use them. If you're watching a lot of movies that are filmed on phones, a lot of times they're using anamorphic lenses. Obviously, you still get that lovely little lens flare type thing. The reason he wanted to shoot this on a phone in particular was it's set on the streets of LA, and he wanted to give it a kind of an immediacy. There's also a sort of run and gun, I'm filming without permits kind of vibe to it, and that's sort of how it feels when you watch it. But it's got a kind of a slice of life, real world stuff to it. But the anamorphic lens allowed him to do a lot more in terms of the visuals, push the visuals a little bit. So that is why he chose to use it. So yes, you can buy anamorphic lenses. What I would say is, in order to use them on your phone, you need to use, we can stop that there, Colin. In order to use an anamorphic lens on your phone, you need to use an app. And I'm going to use an app that is not a really good example anymore. Does anyone know Filmic Pro? Anyone ever heard of Filmic Pro? No. So Filmic Pro is an app that you can download on your phone. And for the last 10 years, Filmic Pro has been like the Apple standard of camera apps, okay? So what they always tell people to do is don't use the app that's built into your phone, okay? Because if you use a third-party app, particularly, and I'm going to use Filmic Pro, and I'll move on from Filmic Pro in a second. I'm just using it as an example, and I'll tell you why in a second. So Filmic Pro is a third-party app, but it's got a lot of functionality. It gives you far more control. You can do, you have a lot more control over the focus and exposure. You can do focus pulls with it. It's got Z-bar, it's got all this sort of stuff. It's basically got all the functionality you'd find in a camera on your phone, okay? So it allows you to do an awful lot built into it, okay? One of the things it does allow you to do, which is to de-squeeze your image when you're shooting with an anamorphic lens, okay? So as I said, without that, and you add an anamorphic lens to your camera, you're gonna get these weird things on the corner of the frames because you're just basically sticking a iris-shaped lens on top of your camera and hoping for the best, okay? But what the app will allow you to do is to squeeze it down so that it looks in the right format, okay? So in order to use an anamorphic lens, you're gonna need a third-party app like Filmic Pro. People generally don't use Filmic Pro as much anymore for the simple fact that it used to be a paid subscription. You pay for it. It was great. Everybody loved it. People are like, whatever. Yeah, Filmic Pro. They used to film competitions. Every filmmaker's worth of salt. Everything you were watching online, filmed using Filmic Pro. Then they tried to change the model. It got taken over by a different company. Then Blackmagic came along and said, we're going to do, as Blackmagic is known to do, we're going to give you something that is the exact same, but for free. And so they did that. So now Blackmagic has a camera app called the Blackmagic Cinema app. You can download on your phone for free. It is effectively the same as the paid Filmic Pro model, and literally has with Blackmagic editing, everyone's like, you know, I'm just going to use the really cool free thing and not use the expensive thing. And I will say that I used to be the guy who used the really cool free thing, but when you're trying to run a business using Blackmagic and something goes wrong and you go online to find the problem, they're like, that's what you get for using the free thing. I was like, well, I can't really say that to my client after I lost their video. So I was like, I'm just going to have to pay for Adobe and then I'll have these problems. But Blackmagic is has a cinema app that is very much built like that, okay? So if anyone wants to download it, you can get it. I'm not sure if it's available. I think it might be only available for certain model phones, but it'll give you enhanced capability. It's got all the same options built into it, but you can change the shutter speed. It gives you far more options in terms of shutter speeds. It gives you far more options in terms of a lot of different things that you can do, and basically just kind of turns your phone into a camera. So when I am out doing run and gun stuff, running around the place, I generally tend not to use Filmic Pro. I generally tend not to use Blackmagic Cinema camera. I generally just tend to use the app that's in my pocket. Depends on where it's going. But if I'm sitting down and I'm working at a shooting schedule and I'm actually filming something, I will use a third-party camera app. Again, it allows you to shoot in different formats as well, which is great for post-production on the back end. And so it gives you a lot more capability than what you're just doing with your phone at the moment, which is pointing and shooting, okay? Which is nothing wrong with that. If that's what people are comfortable doing, do it. Be sure to hold your finger on the screen to make sure you lock the focus and exposure. But as I said, when you get into it, normally I would have a way to show you, and if it was a bit more practical, I'll show you, but I can't really do that. But what I'll do is I'll give you my phone and I'll open the app and you can look at it. Probably the best way to do it. So you can still use, I still use Filmic Pro to a degree, but I don't pay for it. So, so this Blackmagic camera app's only about like a year old, but you can get in and play around with that there. Is it still open?
Yes, but I touched something.
Oh, it's okay.
Fine, so it still works.
Here, I'll take this off. Too dark for that, yeah. Okay. So I will say the usability of Filmic Pro is a little bit easier to use. Because it was just simpler to kind of negotiate the screen and figure out what you're doing. There's a lot more going on in the Blackmagic camera app. So there's a number of different apps. I think that Blackmagic app, I'm not 100% sure I don't know if it's available for Android. It is for iPhone, but it's not, is it? They haven't brought it out yet. Where Filmic Pro used to be available for both, and that was kind of the understanding. Filmic Pro basically shot themselves in the foot. They had a massive loyal fan base and they tried to milk them for all their money, and everyone was like, you're all right. So they dropped it, and people were pretty frustrated about that. So as I said, if you want to use an anamorphic lens, you're going to need a third-party app. If you want to shoot something decent on your phone, you're going to want to use a third-party app. And there is a noticeable difference when you use the app over shooting it within your camera in terms of the color and all that sort of stuff. So there is real value in kind of getting to grips with these apps and using them, and not necessarily using just kind of the camera app that's in your pocket. Okay, so any other questions about it? I'm just trying to cover my bases. Any other questions about lenses or anything like that, or apps? Yeah, okay. Obviously then you start moving into, the funny thing is I'm talking about camera equipment specific to phones, but with those tiny dongle adapters, every single piece of equipment you have for your camera works for your phone. Doesn't really make a difference. You can buy whatever and use it as long as you have the correct adapters to connect them up. Doesn't really make a difference. Then you've got your gimbals. Generally, I don't, as I said, I would use these if I was doing something narrative. If I was shooting a documentary or a film, I would use it. I would fold it into my plan. For narrative reasons, this is why I'm using it. This is why I want this particular motion. I generally don't use this day to day. I'd rather just pick up my phone and shoot. There's apps in your phone. Has everyone used CapCut?
Yep.
Yeah, CapCut allows you to motion blur movement now. And so with that adaptation within it, you can pretty much just walk forward with your phone and then speed it up and put in motion blur. So it's not really something I'm ever really concerned about vibrations or shaking. Okay, but that is this would be a kind of a top of the range gimbal for your phone. This is brand new. I'm not really selling it. Can I get my phone back there for a second? It's got a lot of, did I give it back?
No, that's back here.
Someone making international calls with it?
Yes.
All right. Hello? Just checking. There's no money in that. Yeah, so I mean, as I said, one of the problems you used to have with gimbals is the geniuses who made them never factored in that you'd want to connect a microphone to them. And so you couldn't really record sound with them. That's changed a lot now. There's different ways you can do it. For like 12 quid, you can buy a horseshoe that attaches to the handle here and sticks out here, and you can plug a shotgun microphone onto the top of it. So as you move, the shotgun microphone's in front of it, if you want to do it that way. They also left space. One of the big problems they had is they never used to leave space on the bottom side of it for you to plug a microphone in. That's kind of changed. You can plug wireless microphones into it. Hence why I'm dancing around buying new wireless microphones specifically for this, even though I'll have 4 gimbals, I have wireless microphones for each of them. But anyway, I have a big sign in my head that says, idiot, I'll give you my money. But because every time you buy something, it makes you better. Isn't that right, guys? It's not about practice, it's about buying technology. But anyway, so this stuff has got like, everyone used one of these, yeah? At one point. You prefer the phone? Not for a phone. I have a Fiotech Scorp for my camera. Does anyone know a Scorp? And it's class, it's deadly, but I only use it for my camera. For this, I would use my phone. Let me just do this here. Now this has got loads of bells and whistles that you, hold on a second, aren't necessarily going to use. This is my problem with gimbals as well, is that they sometimes have a life of their own. I'll let people use this just to give you a feel for it. It's incredibly light. So the Scorp I have for my camera, as we all know, when you use one, my back starts to hurt and my wrists start to hurt very quickly. When you feel this now, this is very light, and this would be pretty high end in terms of what it can do. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on this. Like, I'll see if this works. I mean, if you really want to have a Christopher Nolan film in your pocket, I mean, you can do. This has got Inception mode built into it. So when I do this, 3, 2, 1, it should just constantly rotate like this until I tell it to stop. Do you know what I mean? So again, if you're doing something kind of cool, you want to do that, that's great. Stuff like that is fun. Do you know what I mean? That's a built-in option that's built into it. It's got things. So stuff like that I like. It's got a lot of stuff you probably wouldn't, I'll save that. It's got a lot of stuff you probably wouldn't use in a filmmaking capacity, more so in like a vlogging type thing. The example I will give you is, yeah, so it's got gesture control. Yeah, so if I turn this on and move, let's have them here. Now I just feel like I'm at a thing, but so if I go, so it's on now. It's not working. And it was working. Do me a favor, will you put your finger like that? Is it because it's so dark in here, I wonder?
Yeah, it's probably because you're in shadow.
Yeah.
No, that's it.
Yeah. So it'll follow me around if you want it to stop. Yeah. Someone jump up and have a shot. Jump up here and give it a go. Yeah. So you probably just have to stay in the light. It's not working in this. So get closer. Yeah. Now move around, but move closer. Yeah. So I've tried to trick it. I spent hours doing this. Yeah. So when the red light comes on. So that is great, right? What's the problem with that if you try to use it in like when you're outside of a kind of a social media type thing? Now you just look like a crazy person. You're like,
It likes me too much.
technology, stop! Yeah. Thou shall not pass. Yeah, it's real creepy now, isn't it? Yeah. Hold on, I got this. This is, by the way, how Judgment Day begins. It starts with one wayward drone. Where are you going, Dave? So that is fine. It's fine. It's great. It's fun. Bells and whistles. I use it a lot for social media. What's the problem with something like that if you try to construct a shot around it?
Well, the actor's gonna do this.
Well, yeah. Well, someone's going to come in and do that afterwards. I mean, it's got tracking. You can track an object. You can track a dog. You can do all this sort of stuff with it. The point is, it's very mechanical, and it has a very mechanical feel to it. And so if you're okay with that and you want to have that kind of slow mechanical vibe to it, it's a lot different to mounting a camera to a rig and just kind of moving it along. It's very slow and mechanical and has that feel to it. And when it's included in something, you feel that when you watch it. Okay, you feel this weird kind of, it's a machine feel to it. It doesn't have a natural feel to it. It draws a lot of attention to itself because of these subtle movements and changes. Do you know what I mean? And so if that's part of your story, if you're doing something, that's great. But a lot of people come to me and they're kind of, when we're making stuff or when we're doing classes, a lot of times people come to me and they go, I'm thinking about doing mobile movie making. Will I buy a gimbal? And it's the first thing they say to me all the time. I was like, well, no, I mean, I wouldn't. If you need it for your story, buy one. Chances are I would tell you to use something like this, or, just why do you want it? What's it for? What are you going to, I remember I taught a class years ago and it was about two women. We were shooting it and there was two women in a room and they were having tea and they were arguing over a will. And the director in the class, I was like, okay, how's this going to start? And he's like, oh, Rob, you're going to love this. It's going to be amazing. I was like, why? He's like, okay, we're going to start out down the street. Okay, the camera's going to move up. It's going to weave through the crowd. It's going to go into the market downstairs. It's going to go through it. It's going to come all the way up and it's going to circle these two women at a table while they talk about a will. I was like, great. Why? And he's like, yeah, but Rob, I told you, do you know what I mean? The camera, I was like, why? What's that got to do with what you're saying? If I have no problem with him doing it, do it. But he wants to justify it outside of, it would be cool. Okay, and that was basically what it boiled down to. After 15 minutes of conversation, it would look cool. Had nothing really to do with the story he was trying to tell. In fact, it was tonally off with everything he was doing after that, because then it turned into like a kitchen sink drama. And so it was just weird that he kind of was like Ken Loach meets Zack Schneider. And so it was very, very strange, okay? And so I am reluctant sometimes to use equipment like this in that capacity because I think sometimes people want to do very flashy things with it that are very social media-y, flashy things with it. And that's great, but so oftentimes they don't have a justification for using it in their story. And I said, oftentimes it also creates a sort of a mechanical feel to it, which can draw a lot of attention to itself. If that's what you want, that's fine. If it's part of your story, that's fine. Use whatever tool you have. But it is not necessarily the end-all, be-all device that is needed for what you're doing. Oftentimes you can get away with a plastic rig, holding it, whatever it is you need to do, mounting it to a tripod. I mean, it's boring, but it works. It's worked for a long time. And so, like, oftentimes I would be hesitant. Like, I use that an awful lot for social media because I can track myself walking around a room. I can talk on a microphone, I can chat while I move and stuff like that, and it's great. But I can't really envision, I'm prepping to shoot a documentary. With the exception of 1 or 2 shots of people walking down the street, I can't really see myself using it outside of that. Do you know what I mean? Unless I'm trying to do something deliberately very flashy. And if anyone knows me, I'm not a flashy person. No. What I would say about tripods, this is a very stupid question. I have gone through many tripods. Why do you think a heavy tripod would be of benefit?
It does like knock over.
Not even knock over. You're even gone well beyond it. Why else do you think a heavy tripod? Yeah, I work an awful lot with kids, right? And we shoot in prefabs and we set up all these shots. And then we're going to shoot. And the kids get really excited and they walk into every shot like this. And you're like, cool. And then you watch it back and it's just, because we're using these light, crappy tripods you get and thing. And I can't tell them to walk any lighter because they're kids and that'll just encourage them to stomp completely. So heavy tripods are imperative because unless you've got a monitor. Now I have a field monitor attaches via HDMI adapter from my phone into a monitor so I can watch it. To be honest with you, the monitor is comically small and it's gotten to a point now where my phone screen is nearly the same size as the monitor, but it is nice to have a separate monitor you can look at to see what's going on. Again, with that, you're able to sense the vibrations in shot. But a lot of times with this sort of stuff, I wouldn't necessarily rely on using, if you have access to a field monitor, all you need is a HDMI adapter. You can buy them for Apple to connect into your phone to do it. So it's the traditional field monitor, that's fine. There is value being able to see it on a larger screen. One of the drawbacks of this is that you're looking intensely at a small screen, which means you miss a lot of stuff. So as I said, if there's subtle vibrations, you're not going to notice until you blow it up on your TV and start editing it. In terms of editing, in terms of stuff like that, while you talk about it, I wouldn't be inclined to edit stuff for long things on my phone. Does anyone edit a lot of stuff on their phone? Yeah. Would you edit long things on your phone? Yeah. Yeah, I would be very hesitant to go longer than 3 minutes at this point because it's just that you don't have a lot of workspace. So you're better off porting the stuff over to it. And that brings us to the next inevitable part of it in terms of workflow, back-end, data wrangling, stuff like that. People often come to me and they say, Rob, what phone should I get? And my first question would be,
What phone do you have?
no, what computer do you use to edit? Because if you're a PC user and you come to me and you say, I'm thinking I'm getting an iPhone, I'd be like, okay, best of luck, because I bought an iPhone and within 3 days I had a Mac and an iPad. Because I was like, this is infuriating. Why can't I just connect this here and transfer this? So I end up using AirDrops and Google Drives an awful lot to get footage around because I still edit using Adobe. And so I have to transfer stuff it's easier if I just transfer stuff using Google Drives, and that's kind of my workflow is like that. It's saved onto the phone, then I upload it onto a drive, and then I pull it back onto my computer and thing. As I said, I did buy a Mac and an iPad. I was infuriated within 3 days. I couldn't believe how unfair it was that they pull you into this thing and they're like, now you need to have all this to connect this. But as I said, there's value to, as a screening tool, I can airdrop stuff straight from my phone onto my iPad. So if I'm teaching a class, normally I'd have my iPad and I do have it, but it's not charged. Normally I'd be able to show stuff back and forth as we're filming and stuff like that. So as a kind of a default field monitor, stuff like that, it's great. Looking at dailies, looking at stuff in real time on a bigger screen, it's really, really good. But as I said, whatever phone you're going to buy, it really depends on the computer that you use to edit. I would say, everyone's like, oh, the new iPhone's deadly, but between you and me, I prefer the Google Pixel. I think the camera's better. I think the quality is better from what I've seen when I compare them to the tests I've done. I just think it's better. But again, the reason that where iPhone would kind of trump this sort of stuff, probably not a word we can use anymore. He's stolen that from us, fucker. But where an iPhone might be better than an Android is, if you try to imagine Android is one handset spread over thousands of devices. So I mentioned Filmic Pro earlier on as an app. So Filmic Pro worked on both phones, but there was always glitches on my Android as opposed to my iPhone. Because you can imagine app manufacturers, equipment manufacturers always know what camera they're building for, because the iPhone effectively doesn't change. And so it's much more of a streamlined process, where if they're making apps for an Android and you've got Oppo in one place and you've got some brands we've never heard of in another, okay? There's gonna be subtle changes between each of those phones, which means every time I open Filmic Pro on my phone to use it, I know, I'm telling them. Oh, by the way, the end is nigh. Every time I open the apps, Filmic Pro and stuff like that, you get all these kind of messages would pop up. Hey, we fixed this glitch on your Huawei. Hey, this works on the Oppo now. And for some reason, you know, like you can cycle through lens selections on those apps, you know, so you can pick different apps to, different lenses to use at any given time. For some reason on my Android, you could only film in black and white on your telephoto lens. There's just one of these weird glitches that existed. So there's no kind of consistency to it. So that's kind of where the real drawback is between the two. If you really want to get into it, there's really good apps. They're probably gone now, but there's apps where they'll allow you to use Filmic Pro at an app that allows you to shoot multiple lenses simultaneously. So you could shoot a wide and a mid at the same time. And so you can imagine if you were shooting a band or you want to shoot a music video, you were able to film two lenses and get two completely separate video files that were synced up already. You just had to edit them. And so it saved you on setups. And so again, if you were doing something quick and you were out filming, say you were doing something, you only had a day to film it and stuff like that, and you wanted to film a wide shot or a mid shot and a close up of somebody, I'm going to turn this off because it's annoying. So if you were shooting maybe a wide or a mid of somebody, it would allow you to film both of them at the same time, and you could just light the shot for one, okay? And so it would save you on setups. So there is advantages like that, if that's of benefit to anybody in terms of speed. Has anyone got any other questions for me? Yes.
The kind of handheld thing that you have
Yeah.
For the phone, I have one myself, and I find it a little bit more difficult because the lens is slightly over to one side rather than being like centered.
You mean this thing?
Yeah, like because my phone would go into it sideways, it doesn't go into a portrait, so my lens is always over
here.
So my picture is there rather than.
Oh, I get you, rather in the middle.
Very simple fix.
Is it this exact one?
I don't know. I can bring it.
Yeah,
tomorrow.
or send me a photo of it.
Okay.
Because there's loads of different ones. There's one from a company called Shoulder Pod, which I use religiously, which is basically just a block. It's way narrower than this. And I love it because it's beautifully designed and it's much smaller. So you effectively are holding it like halfway, but it's much smaller than this. So it really just, a variation of it might just be the one you have is basically what I'm getting at.
Slightly over to the left, it's a little bit irritating.
Yes, yeah, because then you have to.
Just thinking because you have it there, like was there.
No, it's not something I've had a problem with. But then again, maybe all my stuff is slightly over to the left and I've never noticed. It's just become the new norm for me. And you're like, there's another way.
It's an artistic choice.
Yeah, it is 100%. It reflects the main character's fact that they're wearing only one shoe at any given time and their whole vision is slanted. Yeah. So, what time is it now? I have no idea. Just so I can. 5. Okay, cool. So does anyone have any other questions for me? Again, normally I would have a more practical thing. We'd do a more practical thing. We'd edit and stuff like that and things. So if anyone has any other questions for me about anything at all that you can think of, even if it's just about me, is the splendor that is me.
With which application do you edit?
Depending on what I'm doing, I use Premiere Pro or CapCut. Depends on how fast I want something done. Generally, if I'm doing something for social media, I will use CapCut. And if I'm doing something for like work or a bigger video or a website video or something that's going to require me time, if I'm going to sit in front of my computer for 16 hours, I'd rather sit in front of my computer on Premiere Pro. That said, CapCut has a free desktop option, which is pretty good. And so you can download it for your desktop and edit that way if you feel better, or if you prefer using that sort of thing. Or if maybe sometimes people find things like Adobe. What do you use to edit?
Like I'm using DaVinci on my computer, but on my phone I was only using a CapCut, but just for like quick and simple videos.
I'd be the same. There's obviously there's Rush you could use as well, but again, my problem.
Do you use Premiere Pro on your phone?
I don't use Premiere Pro on my phone.
Okay.
I use my camera on my phone for two very different things. I mean, they're the same thing, shooting video, but they're very different projects. So generally, if I'm taking my camera out, it's going to be something that takes me a lot longer and requires me to spend more time on it. And if I'm going to spend more time on it, I'm going to sit in front of my computer. And if I'm going to do something fast, I'll do it on my phone. And that's generally the logic that I have. So a lot of the times I edit on my phone when I'm out and about, or if I'm at an event and I'm using my phone. I was at a thing yesterday and I used my phone for the entire thing. I shot interviews, I shot a whole thing, but I put that together on my phone because I wanted to get out on social media today.
So you don't use something better than CapCut on your phone?
No, because there's nothing better than CapCut on your phone. No, honestly, I think CapCut's incredible. Just in terms, especially the paid version of it. And if anyone doesn't pay for it, it's much like, does anyone use Canva for free?
Yes.
Does anyone pay for Canva?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things you're like, you're using it for free. You're like, these idiots, there's no way I'd ever pay for this. And then you're like, how have I been paying for this for a year? Because eventually you come up against something that you can't do that you want to do. And so that's how they get you. And so you pay for it. And so I pay for CapCut and I use it. I like it. There's limitations in the sense that I like the fact that you can keyframe with it and stuff like that, but I like the fact that it has a lot of stuff pre-built for me, where we would argue with Adobe, I would have to build a lot of these assets myself, or I'd have to build these transitions and stuff like that. And depending again on the style of project I want to do, if I want to do something quick and I want to have something thrown in, I can just drag and drop something onto it and go. Where when I'm editing on Adobe, I really have to kind of, layer up and put layers on top of each other and make sure everything's in the right place and cut clips in the right place and move stuff around. So it's a little bit, I don't like the technical phrase, it's a little bit more finicky. And it requires a lot more attention and patience. And so I would generally tend to do it that way. But I find I use my camera less and less, to be honest with you. Generally the type of work that I do requires speed. And one of the arguments I always had from day one is speed always wins. It's the same. I remember years ago, I called up somebody for the festival to get, to see if they would help me screen a film at the festival. And I got into an argument with her, and I'm a pretty placid guy. And I got into an argument on the phone because I said I taught classes. And she said that, it's people like you that are destroying our industry because people are hiring people out of college with iPhones to shoot ads for them. And my response is, the problem isn't kids with iPhones. The problem is you're too slow and you're too expensive. And that's what it is. And so speed always wins. It's the same with DVD versus film. Film is an infinitely better looking quality thing. It takes too long. And so obviously the fastest thing is always going to win. And so when I got into this years ago, I remember the guys, we were in college with Kate, I remember I used to say, people are going to keep getting phones. People are going to keep using phones, and phones are going to get better and better and better. And they were like, well, cameras will get better and better and better. And I said, it doesn't matter. Whatever is the most accessible, fastest thing, whatever will get the job done the quickest is what will win. And that was always my argument. And it's sort of playing out that way. Equipment's getting smaller. It's also expectation. Social media has a lot to do with that. It's this desire that everything has to be done quicker. And that unfortunately filters into the mobile phone video side of it. The one thing I hate about all this is it's bred this idea of a one-man band, where just because you can write, shoot, edit, market, score, and distribute on one single device, you should. And so it breeds a lot of people who don't feel the need to collaborate. They don't feel the need to work with a crew. And there is a value of working with a crew. And there is a value of doing that. I mean, just because you can do it on a piece of technology doesn't mean you shun out the whole process and do it all yourself. And that is kind of a problem that exists from that. And I wouldn't, and obviously it allows you to make stuff quicker. And the quicker you can make stuff, the more stuff you can make. And there is also value in taking your time at things. And that's another thing. And I know, ironically, you guys are doing something where you film something over the weekend, and I get all that as a learning curve, and I get all that as a process, and I get all that as fun. But I deal with filmmakers, like I have a filmmaker who submits to the festival. He submits 8 films to the festival that he shoots all himself. That is all shot in and around his house, where he does his own camera work and he does things. And it's good. It's great as a process for him, but it's also somewhat stunting because he's taking in no input from anyone else. He's doing it all himself, and he's not going to kind of grow or learn as a filmmaker because he's not really collaborating. And it is a collaborative process. And that's, people have said to me before, oh, you're not worried that now everyone can make movies. Movies are going to get crapper. And my logic was a pen and paper have been around for generations. Not everyone writes a book. So it's not the tool, it's the artist. It's whoever chooses to use it. I would argue that out of the films that I watch every year that is submitted to the festival, I would argue 30% of them are made by filmmakers who understand lighting, blocking, acting, working with actors, all the essential ingredients. They just chose to use a phone. And I'd argue the other 70% are people who are either halfway there or people starting out. And that's great, and there's nothing wrong with it. And if you can choose, if it's accessible for you to start at, that's fine. But again, the cream always rises to the top, and it doesn't really matter what they use. These are very talented people, and they're the people who generally end up getting to the top and winning awards, regardless of whether they use a phone or not. Perfect. Any other questions?
Can you plug your festival?
Can I plug my festival? I can plug my festival, but I'm not going to. I'm going to plug something even better. No, what I would say is the festival is on every year. Colin has been there. Colin's been to a few classes. He can attest. It is good fun, and there's a nice community to it. And it's great. And as I said, if anyone wants to make something for the festival, if anyone wants to use their phones to make something in Kino, either this time or next time, connect with me. I'll give you free entry to the festival, so you can just submit your film for free and come along. I'd love to kind of cultivate a community of Irish filmmakers, and that's the point. What I really want to plug is we have a workshop on the 6th of July. I didn't bring a QR thing where there's a documentary filmmaker called S.J. Van Brenda, and it's funny, I remember her name because I said her name in a video wrong, and then I ADR'd myself repeating it. And if you hear the video, it's like, this exciting filmmaker, S.J., it's this really bad ADR that I did myself just because I couldn't be bothered shooting the video again. She is coming over to shoot a documentary here. She's an award-winning filmmaker. She won several awards. She's very, very talented documentary filmmaker. And she's coming to Ireland from South Africa for a week to shoot a portion of a documentary / music thing that she's doing. She's following a band, and they're an African band, and she's following around. They're shooting something in Whelan's. And so she's agreed to do a workshop on the 6th of July in the lab with us. And it's, as I explained to Colin, it's totally selfish on my behalf. Every time I talk to her, I plague her for questions about how she does stuff. And so now it's a chance for me to get in a room and she explain it. But she's big on using a gimbal. And she uses a gimbal for everything. And so she's kind of the counter argument to what I said, where I'm like, I don't see the value of it. She uses it all the time. But her documentaries are very experimental. She uses a lot of visuals, the camera's a lot of twirl. She uses a lot of drones, she uses a lot of mixed stuff. There's a lot of energy to her. She's an incredible editor as well. So we have a workshop with her on the 6th of July in the lab. You can find details for it online or on social media. And I'd love to, we're actually nearly, I think we're 65% sold out already, and I haven't really advertised it. So if people would like to attend that, by all means, we'd love to see you there. And you will learn an absolute, way more than I could ever see. She's one of the best people I've seen doing this in years. And she's a really down-to-earth, nice person as well. So Grant, so that's me, I'm Rob. Hopefully that was in some way insightful. As I said, I without the practical side of it, I felt a bit kind of like, oh, what do I do? But it's Grant. I'm no stranger to talking for hours on end. Cool, and I've only had 8 coffees today. So, make movies, not excuses.